Patrick. We'll move it over to Mike now and let him talk a little bit.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon. I probably should have warned David and Kevin up front that they gave us 10 to 12 minutes or so to talk, and my colleague will attest I typically can't say hello in that amount of time. We'll make every effort to do that this afternoon. I'd like to give you a perspective on what's happening in business using what I've observed in the gaming business as kind of a prism, if you will, to help you understand what I've perceived to be the way businesses can often do react in these kinds of situations. One of the few advantages of having gray hair is that you've seen a bit of history and can give you a perspective on some things. In particular in the gaming business, it's fair to say that to some degree it was a bit of a microcosm of the world view or outlook that has just been described about the economy in general. This is an industry which for arguably 50 years has had nothing but success and nothing but growth going all the way back into the 1950s. The growth curve was not really even a curve, it was like a 45-degree angle straight up in virtually every company in the industry, regardless of where they were located. I would have to call it probably something akin to unbridled optimism. If you ask people intellectually, everybody understood that there was a ceiling there. There had to be, that the public's appetite for gaming could not continue to increase exponentially, but as to where that ceiling exactly was, really nobody really knew. And that worldview is really what drove the way we all did our businesses, which is to say, if you were looking at a deal and the pro forma looked promising, you did. There was not a lot of hesitation if the numbers seemed to add up. And I don't mean to say that anyone was wasteful or reckless or careless with their shareholders' money or their own money. But quite honestly, and I had our assistant corporate controller tell me this earlier this year, our attitude tended to be, if we spend capital on this project, that's okay, even if it doesn't really work out because there's no capital where that came from. And that's kind of the way we even interacted with our own employees in general, which is to say we were not wasteful or abusive or reckless, but if these employees tended to leave and just work somewhere else, and I will admit that turnover is endemic to the gaming and hospitality industries, there were more employees where that came from. And that really was the way we pretty much ran our business for a long, long time. And again, a bit like the housing industry, where these kinds of expenditures and these kinds of strategies have to assume that certain things are going to continue. They have to assume there's going to be continued astounding growth. They have to assume that markets are going to continue to grow. They have to assume that the public's appetite for whatever your product is, whether it's bonds, whether it's houses, or whether it's blackjack, are going to continue to grow at a seemingly endless rate. And that's kind of where we were. We talked a little bit, as we said, roughly 2 years ago. Our business was a little bit shorter horizon than that, probably about 18 months ago. Looking back into the middle of 2007, things really began to come to a halt to a large degree in our industry. Gas prices were going up rapidly, more rapidly than anyone could have possibly anticipated. And in most markets, other than Las Vegas, people drive to our casino. In Vegas, they fly in, so you've got a lot of the same kinds of impacts. But in most places, whether it's Council Bluffs or whether it's Hammond, Indiana, people drive to casinos. And if gas is now double what it was a year ago, less people are going to be driving fewer miles to get to where they want to get to, particularly if it is for fun and not for business. And similarly, if your housing costs are going up, or you're suddenly, because of the way your own personal finances are going, you're not making your house payments, or it's more of a struggle for your personal finances, you're going to have less money to spend on what presumably is entertainment, unless you're in that tiny fraction of gamblers that do this for a living. And so what we saw almost overnight was an entire industry that flattened out, and in some markets actually declined. It did here, it hasn't here in Omaha, Council Bluffs, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But in a very broad sense, what we saw in the gaming business was the same thing that many industries saw, with revenues being down or flat, with earnings being down margins were down. And this was really a universal challenge across our industry, whether they're talking about MGM or Sam's, or you're talking about Harris, which are very, very large, multi-billion-dollar companies. All of a sudden, it seemed to hit the fan simultaneously every place where we all do business.